Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another edition of Blasphemers Bible. Last time, you remember, where our intrepid scholars were expounding on Leviticus 15 when Peter suddenly had a power failure and lost everything, and the show was gone. So
Yeah, Peter.
we are going to pick up because one of us hasn't finished my commentary.
I have said 3 Hail Marys, so we should be good today, Arn.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, it had to be.
Say
You're
Hail
supposed to
Satan.
sacrifice a goat and then do a wave offering or something like that.
No. You sacrifice an old computer and you chant the magical 1001001001, and then in binary, obviously the full thing is longer. And
I live in Lilith. I live in a tiny cabin. Where do I put an old computer other than in the trash? I mean, and I don't have a goat
either.
either.
Do a wave offering. Get an old motherboard.
build another cabin for it.
More work.
The tabernacle?
Yeah.
I mean,
The
we're
tabernacle,
reading
but
a
it's just
book
the
where,
tab.
yeah,
Yeah.
tab for tabernacle, right?
That's what the button on the keyboard is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
I'll press
We're reading
escape.
a book where
I'll press
a
escape
600-year-old man
on that
builds a
idea.
giant ship.
I'll just press
Yeah,
escape
well,
on that idea,
Peter's
Lawrence.
A little older than 600. Yeah. Well, I do love how we were in a very interesting chapter where we went from incredibly boring to murder your neighbor for picking up sticks to God as fashion designer needs tassels, needs them, but not nipple tassels because that would be too much fun and we can't have that. And then, blip.
We left
blip.
on
Thanos.
We
It was
left on a
Thanos, that's what
we left on a cliffhanger, Lilith, because it's so exciting.
You're right.
Yeah, but there is a bit to talk about.
Yeah.
Where are we up to?
All right, so we're going to begin this though by doing a recap on the bit that we didn't get to last because it ended so abruptly. So,
Yeah. I do believe
Tomer?
we reread it all, though, right?
We did read it all.
We finished the reading.
But
Yeah.
Tomer was still in his commentary.
Right,
It was.
of course.
So I
We were
think
still in the
I
beginning.
yeah no actually we I think we finished at verse 30, at least from my perspective. So verse 30 about the word defiantly in the NIV, the Hebrew it's beyad rama, which means with upraised hand. The Vulgate renders through pride, Targum Onkelos publicly, and Targum Pseudo Jonathan with presumption. And Milgrom comments, the original setting of this metaphor is seen in the statues of ancient Near Eastern deities who were sculpted with an uplifted or outstretched right hand, bearing a spear, war axe, or lightning bolt. Similarly, the mighty acts of the God of Israel are described as performed by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, Deuteronomy 4:34, 5:15, and 26:8, or by this very expression, with an upraised hand, 33:3 and Exodus 14:8. The upraised hand is therefore poised to strike. It is a threatening gesture of the deity against his enemies or of man against God himself. Thus, this literary image is most apposite for the brazen sinner who commits his acts in open defiance of the Lord, compare Job 38:15. The essence of this sin is that it is committed flauntingly. However, sins performed in secret, even deliberately, can be commuted to the status of inadvertencies by means of repentance. Now about the interesting
Where's our
bit.
intrepid leader going?
Refill?
Sorry if you guys heard that.
Oh, I thought that was actually Arn. I thought he was like picking up a call or something.
No,
not
that
his-
was my
that's his ring.
football league notification.
Football. We don't do sports ball here.
Yeah, yuck.
American
Oh.
hand egg?
Boo sports ball.
Boo sports ball.
Okay.
Go ahead, tell me.
Now about
sorry.
verses 32 to 36. So Ashley comments, this passage assumes the laws of on Sabbath keeping found in Exodus 20:10 verses 11, and especially 31 verses 12 to 17, and 35 verses 2 to 3. The first passage is the part of the Decalogue that commands observance of the Sabbath. The second and third passages spell out this command more generally by prescribing death for a profanation of the Sabbath by work, 31 verses 14 to 15, including even the kindling of domestic fires, 35:3. The placement of the current verses after Numbers 15 verses 30 to 31, which deal with the sins with a high hand, quote unquote, shows that verses 32 to 36 are probably meant to serve as an example of such sin, and this may be their main point, and the reason they are included here. There is no sacrificial expiation of such sins.
Okay.
Well, crap.
Well,
Okay, so
our show is usually on Saturday, which is technically the Sabbath, and I remember a children's game called Pick Up Sticks. I need to play that on stream because fuck this
It's-
guy.
You
I think
can't.
the
The Jews
idea is
can't pick up
gathering
sticks on
bundles.
Saturday.
The idea is gathering bundles rather than just picking up sticks.
Yeah, fine. I'll low curls with a weight or something.
But if you are actually, this is interesting. For the ultra Orthodox Jewish people, they kind of added. Well, they didn't necessarily add it. It could be the Talmud added it. I can't remember exactly, but they added this like really high level additional thing to the Sabbath rules, which is something that you can't use on the Sabbath because it's used for work. So like a tool is considered, you can't touch it or you can't move it on the Sabbath. It's like an extra step. Don't move anything that you can't use. So you're not allowed
Would
to,
my
not allowed
crochet
to write.
count?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Like, so you're not allowed to write. That's one of the main things you're not allowed to do because it's like to do with building and business transactions. So therefore, you can't do like any business because you can't write. Then, so if you can't do any business, you can't handle money because the money is used for business. So it's like this weird like chain of.
Wait, so you
things
can't,
you-
so you can't like go to a place to like eat or something, like
You-
for like
you-
dinner.
You
You
can't
can't
wear
pay-
clothes because you wear clothes when you're conducting business.
No, you
Well-
can, yeah. It's more like you can't pay for something.
Well, like
Maybe a credit card defers payment,
Yeah,
but
this
then
is
that would be
this is
borrowing at interest.
yeah this is
Yeah.
something that is hilarious actually. But that's probably like come up in actual like rabbinic circles because they think about this stuff. They go
Yeah,
very
they do,
deep.
they
Like
do.
they
They're
have
very
they like
deep.
they
and they start
jerry-rig-
making rules and they start making loopholes. From the Christian perspective, the Sabbath is supposed to be a spiritual thing. It's not supposed to be
But you
some
don't even keep it,
man-made little rules.
so,
No, we don't. Yeah, we don't have to anymore. But from our perspective, it's supposed to be a spiritual thing. Rest is a continual thing throughout nature as well as throughout Scripture. The Jews, they like to make up a bunch of rules and add to Scripture. And
That's
create
No,
hilarious
the
loopholes
rules
for
are
considering
very
Christians
clearly
added a
in
testament.
scripture.
But
Because
We're
we added
reading
the
them
New
right the
Testament.
fuck now.
yeah,
right,
building a fence around the Torah, which is the expression that they use. It does have a biblical source. There is this
Mhm.
idea of you should add restrictions around yourself so that you don't come to
A margin of
Um,
error.
yeah
yeah,
exactly.
It's
you
like
you want
with-
to be particularly cautious. You don't want to.
And there is also a
Fuck up.
commandment to listen to the advice of wise men, and the wise men they're interpreted as being Chazal, the rabbis.
Yeah,
Right,
which is
right.
hilarious, right?
That's very
Well, which one do you
convenient.
listen to? It's two Jews, three opinions. Yeah, you pick, right? I
That's what-
listen
that's-
to a rabbi.
That's what the Talmud's all about, just arguing with each other.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I like
but-
it as a pastime. Argument is fun, but you know.
Yeah,
Simon
it's
keeps
kind of
suggesting we read the Talmud on stream, and I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you should. You really shouldn't because it's very very long, and it's actually
mostly boring. Mostly
yeah,
boring.
it's mostly legislative and quite hard to actually learn. So
I'd
and the
rather
interesting
that
bits.
you guys bring in the fun stories about the
Yeah.
weird stuff, like the giant spitting bees and the
yes,
enormous single frog and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
you know
yeah.
the
I
breaking
love
the
those.
two
That's what I was
straws
gonna
at the
say.
same time, and
That's what I was gonna say. The
Yeah.
interesting stuff is all you can kind of find it in the midrash separately. So
yes,
Hmm.
you don't need
but it's also in the Talmud as well. So,
yeah.
but
yeah.
the midrash is
Yeah,
where it's all this stuff happens.
Yeah.
So in verse 32, actually, when we're talking about this, about a man Rabbi Akiva in the Talmud Shabbat 96b identified the man to be Zelofechad, who appears in Numbers 27. This identification, however, is disputed by others, like Rabbi Judah in the same tractate and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Sifrei Zutah. Targums Pseudo-Jonathan reads that the man was of the house of Joseph.
Wait, how do you say his name?
Well, in English, it's Zelofihad, but in Hebrew, it's Tzelfachat.
Really? That's how you pronounce it?
I think so.
I was pronounced it Zelofahad.
Tzelofechad.
I grew up with like
that's the Nikud. I think.
Yeah. I think the Ashkenazi English version was like Tzelofachot.
Okay.
Sounds like cephalopod. Now I'm
I know, right? Tzelofachot.
Do you see that, Arn? Cephalopods are in the Bible.
Oh
You can see
yeah.
it for yourself.
Sorry, just every time I hear him say Salafahud, I want to say do 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 do.
I want to say Gesundheit.
Okay, verse 34. While some, like Targums Pseudo-Jonathan, Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Milgrom, wrote that this verse talks about the uncertainty regarding the method of execution, Ashley, Sonic J. Winegreen, writes that since Moses had to consult God on the matter, one might conclude that this was the first occasion in which a public profanation of the Sabbath was brought to trial. He further writes, it may also be that a deeper question was at issue, whether a man who was gathering sticks on the Sabbath, presumably to make fire in contravention of the law, was as guilty as if he had actually built the fire. Are the intention and the act equally punishable? Later rabbis affirmed intent and action were of equal gravity. Anthony Phillips contended that this narrative was not about intent, but was to extend the kinds of work prohibited on the Sabbath. In other passages, prohibiting Sabbath work is occupational work that is forbidden. Misread it. In other passages prohibiting Sabbath work, it is occupational work that is forbidden. Genana Robinson found the text to concern neither intent nor the type of work prohibited, but took the gathering of sticks to point to building strange fire, quote unquote, which he construed to mean fire to make sacrifices to other gods, thus violating the commandment of Exodus 20 verses 3 to 6 that prohibit idolatry. Lacking a totally convincing proposal to understand the reason for the delay in judgment and why Moses felt it necessary to consult Yahweh directly in the matter, it is best to conclude that the passage is included where it is and worded as it is to provide an example of sins with a high hand, and perhaps the traditional solution that the question about which Moses consulted God was the mode of punishment, as verse 34b suggests.
Basically, can he get out of this by offering a sin offering, or do we have to murder him as a group? And God, as always, went behind door number murder.
You suppose that's why there were goats in the Monty Hall show? Because it was sacrifices?
Now, on verse 38, the tassels, in Hebrew it's tzitzit. This term is found in Ezekiel 8:3, where it refers to a lock of hair. Ashley writes that its basic meaning is probably a projection or protuberance. Levine writes that the word is probably the feminine of tzitz, an ornamental floral design used in fashioning the frontlet worn by the high priest, Exodus 28:36, 39:30, and Leviticus 8:9. He notes that 1 Kings 6:18 describes wall decorations called tzitzim, and the Akkadian tzitzatu means ornament. In Judaism, the tzitziot are a part of the prayer shawl, Hebrew talit, and are attached to each of its four corners.
This one's so the tzitzit commandment is kind of weird, but because it's kind of references a four-cornered garment, technically, like modern clothing doesn't require it at all. So for a long time, Orthodox Jews kind of have worn a special four-cornered garment with tzitzit attached to the corners so that they can fulfill this commandment. So technically, you don't have to do anything if you don't have any four-cornered garments. So they especially wear one.
So how could we blaspheme this commandment?
Is this the garment that Topol was explaining in the beginning of Fiddler?
Pretty much
Yes!
the one that he wears on top of his shirt, like it's literally like a rectangle with a hole in the middle, possibly where the urban legend comes from that Jewish people would have sex through a hole in a sheet. Because
Right.
people
Okay.
might have seen the tzitzit, the talit katan, the small shawl, a Perush shawl, that sometimes it's called that.
Been there, done that.
Hanging on this on the line. So that might be where that urban legend comes from. But yeah, the regular big prayer shawl is just a big old rectangle or square. So that has the tassels on it. But they only wear that like for prayers. So for the whole day, they will wear a smaller one, like either underneath their shirt, above an undershirt, or above their shirt, depending on their community. And then the blue thread is it's supposed to be from a special dye, and since they don't really know which species is the right species for the dye, most people just have plain white ones, and only like certain communities in Israel are like, we know which dye to use, and they have the blue thread
Because it would be something local.
And by the way,
I
I think
think
the
they're
blue
from
is supposed
Turkey.
to mean heavenly, right?
The idea is that you look down at the looking down at the tassels, which should remind you of heaven and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
It's also 39, which means you recall the commandments of the Lord.
Yeah. So the actual tassels, the way that they're tied up, that there's a tradition of how it should be tied up, and it's tied up in a certain way with a certain number of knots and stuff, and so that's supposed to remind you. It's like there's 8 strings or 4 strings that are folded in half to make 8. That represents something, I can't remember, and then it's tied up in a certain way, and that's supposed to remind you of the commandments.
I wonder how
And
different
then
the
when Jesus
traditions
comes
would have
around,
been.
like the tassels start hanging all the way down around their ankles. So
I wonder how much different these traditions would have been if they had duct tape back then.
Well, now that would have been red green.
would have been a lot of quiet Israelites.
So are you saying?
Wow, that went dark. Okay, so Tomer, are you finished with your commentary?
I thought you were reading the comments, so
I was about to read comments, but I thought I would wait for you. But okay, I'll go ahead and read it. So Dave Kirkwood says, "How are the injuries, Aaron? Healing well, I hope." Yeah, I just got an X-ray today, and it turns out that I don't have a cracked rib. That's good. Feels like it, but I don't have a cracked rib, and still have no feeling in the finger. But I went a few years. The first time I chopped it off, I didn't have feeling in it for a while until I chopped it off again, and they reconnected the nerves. I don't think I'm going to chop it off again, but if I do, I don't think they're fixing the damage from this one. All right, and so Red Jester Productions says, this reminds me of when Bill Maher asked the Jewish people making all the machines to get by these rules, something like, don't you think God will know you're trying to fool him?
Yeah. So
Well,
Orthodox Jews are like, we live in a modern world. There's certain things that we kind of need to use day to day and stuff like that. So it affects, like, how do we use them in the context of the Sabbath? So for example, like, electric light switches and stuff, you kind of want them to be off at a certain time, on at a certain time, but you don't want to do it yourself on the Sabbath. You don't want to break it. You don't want to possibly break a rule or whatever. So most Orthodox Jews will use some sort of time switch that turns off their lights at night and stuff like that. And then so they've extended this to thing where they've like invented, lamps that you don't need to turn off. You can just swivel the top and it just covers the light. It's like it's got like a hole in it, so the heat escapes nicely, and you just turn it off by just covering the light bulb.
you literally turn it off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then there's you've got like some people, there's even like lifts in buildings. People live in big buildings. How do you get up to the 8th floor? So the main problem with the lifts is they have a laser. Yeah, you have to physically tell it where to go, but theoretically, if someone else were to do it, there's a laser that tells the door to open. It's a safety feature. So a Shabbos lift will kind of turn that off, and they'll just stop at every floor.
Yeah. I have a Sabbath.
so you
I have
can-
a Sabbath leaf.
in your
I have a
building?
Sabbath leaf. Yeah.
Ah,
Cool.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting from this is that as atheists, we could make a lot of money doing stupid shit for religious people to get around their rules so they don't have to. Also, I really, really want to start a Rapture pet care insurance company.
Ooh, that's a
late.
good one. I
Too
like
late, Lilith. That's already there. So there's a website on the internet where Christians can basically get an account and pay so their pets
Where
are
did
being
that
taken
go?
care of after the rapture.
He was raptured.
I don't think he was raptured.
Seriously doubt it.
Yeah. I do want to say, like,
he gets raptured from time to time.
Yeah, I do want to say, like, you know, we make fun of these things because they're like so different from what we're used to. But when you grow up in this system and you're used to it, it's completely normal.
In all
it
fairness,
doesn't feel like
You even get it from some
Isaac,
Christians, Isaac.
Isaac,
It's crazy.
In all fairness, I mean, in Genesis, isn't God looking for Adam and Eve and he can't find them? So how is he going to figure this one out?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. It's pretty easy to fool God, actually.
Yeah,
like, you can hide in the bushes from him.
Not that hard.
Or in Exodus, he didn't know about the golden calf until Moses told him. Moses went back up and was like, oh, look at this thing.
Well, I would say
Yahweh
Luke.
Yeah, didn't he say, like, your people are doing something bad, so get back down there?
Oh, did he?
No, but
He didn't
God
know.
did not. God sees all things, right? But he knows the future. He knows when every sparrow falls. He knows all things that are ever going to come. He's full of prophecy. But he somehow didn't foresee that he would regret having made humanity and have to wipe the slate clean and start again. Somehow he didn't see that coming. And he didn't know how many righteous people were in Sodom. So Abraham is bartering him down because Abraham, it turns out, is smarter than God.
Where are you getting this nonsense?
We can have some of the bartering.
Did you miss the reading of Genesis 32?
I've read Genesis 32. But
it is 32, isn't it? Or is it 30?
No, it's not. It's before that. It's way before that.
Well, go back and read it. It's all there.
But anyway, I was saying,
yeah, where Abraham says, "Well, what if there's 10 righteous people?" And God said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know how many righteous people there are because I'm only God."
I think he starts with 50 or something, and then it's
he bargains him down.
But then when it comes to Isaac, he's like,
God
"All right,
doesn't know what the number is.
It's not Isaac.
God doesn't know what the number is anyway.
Later on is what I'm saying, Tom.
Right. And so when it comes to the flood, for example, when God regretted what he had done, well, how could he not know that he was going to do something that he would regret, right?
I repent me that I have made man. That's what it actually says. Those are the words.
Repented, yeah.
Yeah. And so instead of starting over
could it-
again,
how
instead
could
of
it be
wiggling
God's
his nose
plan?
or, blinking or whatever it is that he should do, instead of wishing them all into the cornfield, he decides to do this ridiculously elaborate flood thing wherein he keeps some of the broken things that he made before without learning the lesson from what he did before. He could have just made him perfectly this time
his generations
without setting up the ridiculous trap wherein he would have to punish people who didn't know right from wrong for not knowing right for wrong.
You notice how you mentioned P-Town, how Noah was peerless in his day and generation. You notice how all the men who are peerless in their day and generation, according to God, are like either crazy old coots screaming at everyone or like perverts with a lot of young girls.
Yeah, have you noticed that God's favorite people in both of these scenarios always turns out to be a naked old drunk molesting his own kids?
Oh, no. Noah didn't molest his kids. He cursed them to eternal slavery because they laughed at him when he was being a fool. That's so much better.
I think I'm sorry that I'm interjecting. I think we are diverging from the subject.
We're jumping back a little bit.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into another comment. Trevor Wright says, "What did the author mean to convey to the reader of these stories when differentiating what is historical versus what is rooted in tradition?"
Oh yeah. So essentially, they had their own. Every writing from the ancient world, and even today, is propaganda in some sense. So in at this period of time, we're talking about a group of people who had their own their own theologies, their own identity, and they were trying to kind of solidify themselves both in their mind and the world around them. So when kind of deciding what I guess stories to pick, what laws to pick, whatever, what have you, they were taking from both reality and from legendary traditions, and in some cases it'd be like, look at the antiquity of your people. This is why it should be upheld, because tradition was very important to them. In other cases, it would be like, here's how we should be doing things, because when we didn't do it this way, we were punished. There are, for each story, for each section, it would be a different purpose. But the general idea is, I guess you could think of it more along the lines of national identity, especially of establishing a national identity, especially after the time of the exile, for example, or during times of strife in general.
And I would add to that, if I may, building extreme rigidity around certain elements of that national identity. Much later, I'm sorry to jump ahead, but we will eventually read Ezra and Nehemiah, who are the two who sort of returned and rebuilt Jerusalem after the exile, and they are the ones who put together the Torah. Remember last time when I talked about the sources put together, this is the canon. And they were very extreme about certain things. So one of them was purity, maintaining the purity of the law and the racial purity of the Jewish people. One of the delightful stories that I learned as a child, because Christianity is so appropriate for children.
Well, most of the stuff everyone's talking about is not anywhere.
I'm not done, Baytown. Is in when they returned, and some of them took foreign wives, these godless heathens, and they were reproved by the leaders of the community. And one man said, basically, screw you, I love my wife, and went to his tent with her. And another man, who was part of the pro-Yahweh fanatical congregation, literally went in with a spear and pinned them both to the ground, killing them both while together. And that God said through his prophets that this man had done right, that he was zealous for the name of God, and that he was admirable for having murdered this married couple in their beds. So that type of thing, historically, or the advocacy of that type of behavior, is often what works its way into some of these stories, and how admirable it is to kill for anyone who might piss God off.
I would want to point
Makes
out
me wonder why
that
people come up with spooky Halloween stories when the Bible's full of even worse shit.
Well, it does have a lot of wild stuff in there. However, I do want to point out, you're talking about Ezra and Nehemiah, the period of the return. The idea that it was either Ezra or Nehemiah that actually compiled it, I don't think that's actually been held for a long time. That was part of Wellhausen's hypothesis, and Friedman.
Yeah.
Also, well, Friedman's kind of, well, he's not actually that smart. But he he also upheld that hypothesis. Which, I mean, that it is in the same book that I learned about the documentary hypothesis in general. And once you get to like the last few chapters of that book, you're like, your reasoning is like bad, man. But like since then, I haven't actually come across that idea in like any other circles.
Fair enough. And that's, I mean, it's, I always try and say it's more complicated and stuff.
Sure,
but the attitudes of the people who were reinstating the religion and bringing the people together and throwing out of the community the people who had resided there maintaining the religious tradition. but who were, married people who were still there. That kind of extremism is, and Ezra and Nehemiah, are probably slightly more historical placeholders than Moses in the dialogue, but it's not just them. It's not just anyone. They're in a sense representative of that sect at that time. And I mentioned this earlier before the show. Lawrence and I were discussing something about the Deuteronomistic histories, another source material, and that also was a Yahweh supremacist cult, not the Yahwist source when discussed in the documentary Hypothesis Outline, but that there have been basically multiple times where throughout this network of various sources and fragments and supplementary, the narrative has been yanked quite forcefully by supremacist cultists for Yahweh, and it's always quite violent when it is.
I got a couple more comments to read. Aunt Jer says, "What's the difference between swiveling the cover and flipping the switch? Are they not both work?"
And then she added another one. There's like a continuation.
Oh, okay, gotcha. In addition to my question, add in lighting a match to light a candle to my question above.
Yeah, so the original thing is like ignition, like lighting a fire. So striking a match, lighting a fire. They, for hundreds of years, they're like, okay, obviously this is forbidden. And then when electricity came into being as like being used in household devices and stuff, I think initially it would have just been like, oh, this is too similar to fire. There's sparks going on or whatever. So they just kind of forbid it as being like that. And then as they kind of realized that it's not really fire, they were like, it's people already not using it. It's not really in the spirit of the day. So they were kind of looking to find a reason why it shouldn't be allowed. And they were like, a circuitry is like building, more or less.
So if you build an electronic device, and it performs these functions for you, you have an automated robot. Now, whether that is an AI, whether it's an android with self-awareness or an artificial intelligence, or whether it's just an automated device with timers or whatever on it, in either case, does the Bible not apply to it as neither you shall work nor your servants?
Good question. Well, I mean, in general, Jews wouldn't ask, they wouldn't ask a non-Jewish person to break the Sabbath for them, but they might do something where they might hint, and so in a sense, kind of say like, oh, this room's really warm, but we're not allowed to turn the air conditioning on. And then if a non-Jewish person were to turn the air conditioning on, it wouldn't be seen as them like directly doing it for them because it benefits them as well. But this is one of those things that it gets really iffy and people don't really know the correct law. And then
modern day loopholes. It's the same stuff that
these are, but you have to remember these are loopholes. If these are loopholes, they're loopholes to rabbinic things. They're not loopholes to God's law. We've said, okay, here's God's law. I don't want to break it, so I'm going to add all of these extra layers on top of it. But that makes it actually difficult to keep the Sabbath, to enjoy the Sabbath, which is also very important, right? So the spirit of the law is also important. So in order to kind of keep all of those extra levels that we've added, but also enjoy the day, we need to have certain loopholes for practicality.
It's just manipulation. I mean, if your mother comes by to visit you, she's going to say, "Gosh, it's hot in here," and look at you expectantly.
You're sounding almost like Jesus.
That is one of the weirder practices, which is like, but people, there are famous people that are like, yeah, I used to be the Shabbos guy in my neighborhood. For all the Jewish people, I would go in there, turn their fires off and stuff.
But would they give challah the next day as like, thanks for being the Shabbos guy?
Yeah, they normally would get presents and stuff.
Presents are good.
Yeah.
All right.
Like,
I got a couple more comments to get through. So James Hogue says, I missed the part where God instructed Adam and Eve to remain righteous when he sent them out of the garden.
Oops.
I haven't actually noticed that one before. Well caught.
Yeah. And then let's see, we have PhD Tony, who offers $10 Australian and says, religious tradition gives an explanatory mechanism for things people couldn't observe. They lacked microscopes, germ theory, recording techniques, etc. So they came up with explanatory stories.
He should look into Samoes. I think that's how you say his name. Before we came up with germ theory, the guy that probably actually discovered germs before the germ dude.
Oh, yeah, Semmelweis. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen all his kung. I know that guy. I've seen all of his kung fu movies.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I actually just watched a video on him the other day. But yeah, PhD Tony. First of all, love your work when you're on FTFE. It's very entertaining watching you on there. But yeah, that's only part of the story, right? Like that's only a part of the reason, because you also have to explain. They also have to explain historical. Like historical realities, ethical dilemmas. Like they also had a lot of other things to explain. So like that is certainly one layer of it, but there are others. Yeah.
If you're trying to say that smart people aren't religious, then you're not learning history.
Sweetie,
who said that?
That's the impression I'm getting. Or am I missing something?
From Tony? Is that the impression you're getting from Tony? I see. Okay.
Not you, Lawrence.
Discussing the origin of religious thought, and I'd like to say that in addition to what Lawrence said, there is obviously the explanatory power, the personification of the things we don't understand, but many other things: ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas, historical. But as human beings, we need purpose, and we need to be part of a story. We find that not need to explicitly, but it's something that motivates people quite effectively to make them part of a story, some inspiration, to make them part of something greater. And that's, I think, part of the appeal of religion, but also part of what has enabled it to get so big for its britches and kind of ruin everything.
Daniel Quinn posits that's the fundamental element of culture, is the narrative that you as a member of society get to be a part of. And when one story conflicts with another, those cultures go to war, and one conquers the other, and so on, and until eventually you reach a point where people who don't agree with the narrative can't escape the story, which is sort of the situation that happened during World War II. Some people were able to get away because they didn't want to be part of that story. They didn't want to be victim of that culture's narrative, but not everybody was. And things have gotten rather more intense since then.
And that's, I mean, you talk about stories. How often are they true? Ezra and Nehemiah writing, compiling. Well, it's not that simple. But, they talk about, Lawrence, help me. The female philosopher who the myth says was killed by Christians burning down the Library of Alexandria.
Hypatia.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I pronounce it like that because Americans.
Yes.
That's fair.
But it's in a sense a true lie. She was murdered by a band of fanatical Christians. They were not actively burning down the Library of Alexandria at the time, nor were Christians the only ones or even the first ones who burned down the Library of Alexandria. But they destroyed so much knowledge
Alexandria
deliberately.
was pretty corrupt, though.
Sweetie,
because of
it's
knowledge.
a library.
There were some
damn librarians.
There were some fraudulent books going on there.
Oh, you mean like the Bible?
Yes, actually. That's where the Septuagint was translated. I think.
The thing is, like, that you could say that
there's a lot
like
going on over in Alexandria.
Yes,
well,
sweetie.
The thing is,
it
at the same
doesn't
time,
matter.
we don't even.
Why do you keep calling me sweetie, honey? Oh
Okay, I think we're diverging too much.
Yeah. There's one more.
Yeah, one more comment.
Yeah, P-Town. I don't want to have to explain the sweetie comment to you. I'm just going to say, just bless your heart.
Oh, you are Southern.
We've got another comment from Denum, who says, weren't golems exempt from the work laws?
I don't know, but golems aren't real, so much of a difference.
Well, if you're going to use that kind of prejudice when reading the Bible,
Not with that attitude.
Frankenstein's monster can do your shit.
The Golems were just a fun Jewish medieval comic series, you know.
yeah, a
We're-
fun Jewish implement of murder.
Other things than murder.
We're about
I
to
know,
get
I
into the.
don't think it murdered anything, did it?
I think we're about to get into the rebellious section of Numbers.
Yeah, but
We
yes,
are.
but I
You guys
I
might
actually,
have something in common with this.
Have you
Let's
finished,
hear
Tomer?
Tomer say this important thing that he's
Yeah.
about to say. Everyone listen carefully.
verse 39. So you will remember. Milgrom wrote that while the term for remembering in Hebrew zikaron is mainly used to remind God to remember Israel, there are 5 reminders that are not directed to God but to Israel, and this is one of them. He writes that the fringes and mnemotechnical devices to remind Israel of God's commandments, and that the purpose of the ritual is to lead to conviction by means of sensual experience, and finally to action. Chazal in the Talmud Menachot 43b formulate this, quote, sight leads to memory and memory to action. And finally, on not prostitute yourself, the word for prostitute here is zonim, from the root zainun hey. As noted previously, this root means to fornicate, and according to Levine, is used to convey the infidelity of Israel as a people and of its leaders in metaphorical terms, like Deuteronomy 31:16 and Hosea 2:7. And that's it for my commentary on this chapter.
Oh my gosh, only
Where's the
43
60?
minutes.
Well,
Yeah.
to be fair, you spent like 20 minutes over the comments talking about irrelevant stuff. So don't blame me on this, please.
Us tangent? No,
Like-
that never happens.
Yeah.
So Amber read last time. Who should read this time?
Maybe
I
I should because
suppose-
it's Hebrew words again. At
All
least
right,
in the first part.
there should be
Not that
something
many.
to note. So this this chapter, this story, was rebellion.
He's freaking chapter, let me tell you.
It wasn't
yeah.
written then, and it was compiled by a bunch of other stuff.
Okay,
They
the
did this
thing about
to
this chapter is that
a
it
giant
is
conspiracy.
indicative. It's not a conspiracy, but it's indicative of this complex textual tradition. The reason for that is because the amount of doublets that occur, and it seems like it's not telling one story. And a lot of people, even kind of early on, realize that. And because of that, this has been used as a very good example text for something like the documentary hypothesis. You can tell that there are multiple sources here. And as we go through it, we can kind of, just list off a few things. Like, for example, like this is in like verse 1, so it's not like a big spoiler. It mentions On, son of Peleth, right?
Yes.
He doesn't
yes,
occur anywhere else in the story.
Yes.
There's
I
absolutely
comment
no
about him as well.
necessity for him being there at all. Things like it's just like small things, but you need to actually do like a critical reading of this and pay attention, because then, in the same way that you were able to discern that the last chapter of Leviticus was a later edition, you could probably also notice that this is a very weird story and it doesn't really flow at all. People get lost reading this story because it doesn't really make that much sense. And there's a good reason for that.
Which is why they put it in the Bible?
Even internally.
But you
So-
you can't put it up there with the last chapter of Leviticus, though, right?
No, I mean it's different. A different kind of interpolation entirely. Like one
Okay,
is
just one
just like in it, like stapled onto the end, and this one's kind of like interspersed, right? So they are different in that way. But I think that that since you had the ability to realize the thing with the last chapter of Leviticus, I think that if you do pay close attention, you will also find the complexities with this chapter.
Okay, I'll read up to 22. Okay.
Right.
Now Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, betook himself, along with Datan and Abiram, sons of Eliav, and On, son of Peleth, descendants of Reuven, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation?" When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Then he spoke to Korach.
He did a face plant, dude. I'm sorry. I'm reading the California translation.
Yes, of course. Then he spoke to Korach and all his company, saying, "Come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and will grant him access to himself. He will grant access to the one he has chosen. Do this. You, Korach, and all your band, take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before the Lord. Then the man whom the Lord chooses, he shall be the holy one. You have gone too far, sons of Levi." Moses said further to Korach, "Hear me, sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you access to him to perform the duties of the Lord's tabernacle and to minister to the community and serve serve them? Now that he has advanced you and all your fellow Levites with you, do you seek the priesthood too? Truly, it is against the Lord that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you should rail against him?" Moses sent for Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, but they said, "We will not come. Is it not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, that you would also lord it over us? Even if you had brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey, and given us possession of fields and vineyards, should you gouge out those men's eyes? We will not come." Moses was much aggrieved. Moses was much aggrieved, and he said to the Lord, "Pay no regard to their oblation. I have not taken the ass of any one of them, don't laugh, nor have I wronged any one of them." And Moses said to Korach, "Tomorrow you and all your company appear before the Lord, you and they and Aaron. Each of you take his fire pan and lay incense on it, and each of you bring his fire pan before the Lord, 250 fire pans. You and Aaron also bring your fire pans." Each of them took his fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and took his place at the entrance of the tent of meeting, as did Moses and Aaron. Korach gathered the whole community against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then the presence of the Lord appeared to the whole community. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Stand back from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant." But they fell on their faces and said, "O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community?"
Right. So I got a couple comments here. First of all, I think it's amusing. You told me not to laugh when you mentioned that Moses didn't take any of their asses.
Yeah, I mean, people still use ass to refer to donkey, and why?
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, I'm reading the Californian interpretation, and when it says "you have gone too far," my version says they went messing around that freeway, or they were rushing down that freeway, messed around, and got lost. So that explains why they were 40 years in the desert. They kept missing their exit.
Like trying to drive through Chicago. You miss one exit, you'll be there 40 years.
Okay, I'll start my commentary. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Wait, I thought that Arn had something about a comment.
Yeah, I thought so too, but then he was being silent.
I just wanted to listen to the crickets after I told that joke.
Okay. All right, that's fair.
There you go.
I do love how we have established the playbook for every cult leader whose minions ever try to get them to share power. Threaten them with death, and then act very self-righteous about keeping the imaginary death from them, or some of them, if they're very good. Also, we notice that God's favorites are not dramatic at all. Not at all.
Nope.
So I do
All
want
right.
to
So
put
the next
before...
comment in
sorry, go ahead.
the list is Cal Reese, offers $10 and says, "Shouldn't P-Town read? Then he could actually contribute really anything to the show. I haven't heard him read, and he hides his face. Spooky, scary atheist sends shivers up his spine." Hey,
He has read
give
before.
I'm so creepy.
yeah, but give full cred now. P-Town did show up at not just an atheist group, but he showed up at a Satanist group, and then offended
Well,
all
right.
of them
Well,
by
just
telling
one
them that they
person.
were going to be that he thought that female impersonation meant that they would be dancing naked in front of children.
I had to ask the drag queen dude if I can watch the show, Aaron, and then after I realized I offended him, I apologized and asked how could I have done it better. Help me here. I'm trying. I was like,
Well,
I recognize I'm not very good at this.
I do think asking is a good first step. So
I didn't
Yeah.
know what it was gonna be.
The drag queen dude.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Brilliant
So
right out the gate.
despite popular opinion among this congregation of heathens, I can read, and I don't mind. I'll read next. It's fine.
Okay.
I don't
Pick
mind.
Also, to be fair, he's a Poe, so he's doing okay. He's doing exactly what he should be doing.
He has read before. He has.
He has.
Yeah.
He has read before. I do want to point
Okay.
out. So
Sorry.
before we get into the verse by
Yeah,
verse.
sure.
So for all my issues with Friedman, which by Friedman I mean Richard Elliott Friedman,
Not Manus.
oh, actually that.
Oh, Richard
him too.
Elliott. Not David.
So,
Knoll.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
not David. No, he's all right. So in his book, Who Wrote the Bible, he has this rebellion story in Numbers. So I don't know how well you can see this, but he has this separated, where part of it is in bold, and part of it's not. And he has the priestly text in bold and the Yahweh or the Yahweh's text in regular type. So just to show you guys how it kind of fits together, you can pull out another story from this. So it starts, or I will go with I don't want to reread everything, right? So I'm going to go with the shorter version from what I see here. So Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, rose up before Moses. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and they said, "We will not come up." And then it goes through verses 15, and then it goes back into the other narrative. And then, sorry, what verse did you read to, Tomer?
22.
22. Okay. Well, then we're gonna get back for at least a verse to another author in like verse 25. Maybe there has been some argument over that. So while there may be some places where I don't fully agree with his separation of the texts, he does a very good job of showing you, listen, you can pull out two narratives. You can create two separate narratives from this one book. So,
that are pure and coherent and work as their own stories without any fudging around. It's right, very much a zipper structure.
It is. That's a very good way of putting it. A zipper structure. I like that.
In fairness, there are novels today that are published with similar issues.
Even
no, Twilight is just all bad.
Even Ashley notes that there are two stories combined into one narrative in this chapter.
Yep. Yeah. And Ashley is a conservative scholar. So this is unanimously agreed upon in scholarship. Like everyone is like, okay, there are two stories here. They might disagree on which verses go where sometimes, but
they might argue whether 25 is part of story A or story B, but it's clearly not one.
Exactly.
So they would argue whether it's 25 or 624.
Well, there's probably a lot going on in just a short period of time here. I mean, there's a lot of backstories. There's multiple families coming together to rebel against
the reason for the rebellion doesn't quite you wouldn't.
It's pride. It's pride. It's jealousy. Because
no.
they want to go
No, not over this.
top of the pyramid. Well, what is it?
Right? What?
Pyramid.
What?
Wait, what?
It's pride.
Wait, what?
Remember,
Wait, what?
remember, Christianity involves seeing everything in an authority hierarchy. And in fairness, this is about establishing and maintaining an authority hierarchy. You know, we can't have anyone who has any kind of, this is kind of like if the Magna Carta failed. Isaac will know it, like the Magna Carta is, you know, the basically Prince John, Robin Hood, bad guy. When he became king, he was such a shitty king that all the nobles got together and basically said, okay, you're going to share power or you're going to lose your head. Sign. And he did. And that's the basis of civil and human rights in Britain. But basically this Magna Carta attempt failed because Moses is like, no bitches. God gave me the power and he will kill you all.
But imagine this, after, like, if we take it literally, which is really hard for you guys to do, but if we do take it literally, after everything that this congregation has gone through, this group of people, they're still going to rebel and try to say that they can do a better job than Moses after everything that's gone on
They
for
don't
the last
say
Yeah,
year.
because
They share the power.
using Moses as an example of how many times he fucked up so majorly, it's kind of easy to see, don't you think?
Well,
God
part of it
parted
is
the water. Like, I mean, the plagues.
part of it is that,
like, these Jewish dudes have amnesia. Like, it's clear over and over again.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Or it never
But you're going to
happened.
defend
Literally.
it as it's some political thing.
Yeah,
when
I mean, Moses
clearly-
goes up the hill to get the supposed 10 commandments, which is actually like 30 some odd commandments. And in the month that he's gone, his own brother makes the golden calf for everybody. His own brother, who then becomes, when God commands to kill every man and his brother, well, then Aaron doesn't get killed, does he? He gets to be high priest, and they go into intricate explanations of what kind of feather boa and what other jewelry that he gets for his wardrobe and all of his glory.
No feather boas, only the nipple tassels.
Yeah,
even if
it does seem to come across as a polemic against like equality, right? Like Korach is
two
trying
things.
to say like everyone is holy.
there's
Yeah.
one is
They're all the people of God.
one story is about political power. The other one is about like priestly privilege.
Yeah.
There's a reason we call them the laws of Moses, even though they're supposedly from Yahweh.
Well, because a whole lot of legal traditions do that kind of thing. They're the laws of they're like Draco's laws or Solon's laws, right? Like the
Robbie.
lawgivers, even if they're not the originators of them.
Yeah, it's
They-
whoever has the power.
Yeah, if they gave the law, I mean that's kind of their whole job. But yeah, a few things stand out here, right? Like who would be like why would all these groups be because the Levites were the ones specifically to have their priestly they were the ones with the priestly duties, right? So Alter notes here that the conjoining of Levites and Reubenites is the first signal of an underlying problem in the entire episode. This is a rare instance, and we do say rare because some of the actual stories are internally logical. So this is a rare instance in which the editorial orchestration of literary sources, instead of producing like a well thought out story, generates repeated dissonance. Two rebellions have been combined: a rebellion of Levites for the priesthood and a rebellion of Reubenites for political power. It's fitting that the latter should not come out of the tribe of Reuben, for Reuben is the firstborn who has been passed over in the struggle for political preeminence. As the two stories twine around each other, it emerges that there are two different places of confrontation. For Korah and his people, the sanctuary, or before the Lord, where the trial of the fire pans occurs, and for Dathan and Abiram and their followers, the entrance to their tents. And there's also two different modes of destruction. A consuming fire engulfs the Levites, while the Reubenites are swallowed up by the earth. It's very clearly telling two different stories, and they have been zippered up. Because the one of these tribes wouldn't even have like the priesthood in mind. They wouldn't care. Wasn't their job.
You know that.
Because
The Reubenites
so do you
were
wait,
not
hold on, hold
agreed.
Want a different
Do you
job.
not believe the Bible, P-Town?
No, I'm just curious. I'm just trying to confirm with you. Like, is there textual like support for that?
Yes.
Of it being a different tradition, or
No,
what do you mean?
that they wouldn't. Why would they not want that job?
The
My
Reubenites.
initial
'cause if
impression of
you-
reading this was because they weren't satisfied with their job, their position.
You're
they
still
sought another
seeing it as one group. These are two distinct groups, each within the different stories. One being Reubenites, and the tribe of Reuben has nothing to do with priestly duties.
Yes, we're talking about Reuben, son of Pastrami on Rye.
But
Well,
I think what P-Town
If
is
the
asking.
Pastrami Rye wanted to be, I don't know, ham and cheese.
So
It could be, right,
that's
Lawrence? And that's why
Davidzon-Atai is from the tribe of Reuben, but verse 2 also says that there's 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community. So it's possible this might also be to do with the tradition of where the firstborns were the priestly class and they were replaced by the priests. So
By the Levites.
the Levites are replaced by the priests, and the firstborns are replaced by the priests. I don't know if that was linear or the two different traditions. And then it looks like they've combined them. And the Reubenites might have just been like they're next to the camp of the Levites, in the layout. So that might have had some influence on which ones were next to it, which ones were influenced by who. And
Well, let me put it this way: we have no suggestion in either the biblical text or in or I don't know if we have suggestions in rabbinical texts. I believe they do say a few things about this story, about why they were mad, right? That they were mad because like they wanted the power, right? I had something pulled up here actually.
I have my commentary, but I'm waiting on that.
Right? Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you could. I'm sure you'll.
Well,
you'll hit on
there's
those.
no indication
the impression that I
Reuben
get
ever
is that
wanted
there are lines drawn.
religious power.
God has ordained certain people for certain things,
Right.
and there's other people who are jealous or they're prideful or whatever words you want to use to describe it, and they're trying to cross these lines, and God's not having anything of it.
Okay, so at this point in the biblical text, do we, or even in even use the Deuteronomistic history, at any of those points, do the Reubenites ever seem, or do they ever give any indication of hostility towards the Levites?
But not for the priesthood specifically.
By
They don't-
implication,
they don't give any issue for where they vie for priestly authority. As the firstborn, they would be more likely to vie for political authority, kingship, that sort of thing. At no point is there any indication in any of the stories that they are vying for special spiritual recognition like the Levites have.
Yeah, we get that with like the Zadokites, for example.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. But not Reuben's clan. I assume you could always find one example somewhere, but I can't think of any individuals even that had that. That was more where you had like Judah and Benjamin and the kingly, but when Saul prophesies because he gets the spirit, whatever, like there's a little bit of mingling with the political powers that actually obtain political power with the spiritual. There's some jockeying there, for lack of a better term, but at no point does Reuben advocate for specific spiritual power.
that there's also I think a traditional commentary on like what their motive was, and there's the idea that maybe they would have seen like Moses choosing his brother to be and family to be like almost like nepotism. They would have seen that as being rather than them rebelling against God. They were seeing, oh, this is Moses doing this himself. This isn't God's plan, and they were trying to say, we were all there at Sinai. God spoke to all of us.
And
what makes your family better than everyone else?
As Aaron pointed out, that's a very justified thing when Aaron was the one who built the fucking golden calf, and then suddenly he's the high priest. Like, right, yeah, no nepotism involved there at all. Totally legit, very God, much believed.
one of the interpretations from Pseudophilo was in that time he commanded that man Moses about the tassels, and then Korah and 200 men with him rebelled and said, "Why is an unbearable law imposed upon us?"
Yeah, I think
think
that's
maybe-
the rabbinic interpretation as well
Right.
about the
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah. They ask him a question that doesn't, and then his answer doesn't make sense.
yeah.
to
I
them.
think it.
I
They
might
had to
I
make
might
it
have
fit with the
something
preceding
here.
narrative.
What if
Perfect.
the confusion here is because it's broken down into political issues and religious issues, and that's why it gives the impression that there's multiple things going on, Lawrence.
Well, the fact that
Common
you can
theme.
the fact that you can because like two topics being discussed isn't like an unbelievable thing. That's not crazy. But when you are able to pull out of an entire document another document and have two complete stories side by side, that is indicative of something, especially when together they don't make much sense.
Oh, so you're referring to something outside the Bible?
Well, no,
That's not right.
that was a later interpretation. That was them kind of coping with the idea of like, why is this placed here? What's the purpose of this story being here? We were just talking about tassels. So, yeah, that
In the
later
previous
interpretation
chapter.
was
Connecting it. We'll mention that.
Yes.
Well, I mean, pride and all of that is associated in the New Testament with Jesus and the Pharisees. So if you consider the New Testament, it's not out of context.
I'm unclear.
Jesus went to pride. What did I hear?
He references the Pharisees
he was
and their really long
fabulous.
tassels being full of pride. Yeah. My point is it's not. It doesn't seem out of context from my perspective.
So why are they mad about the So do you think they're mad about the tassels?
No, I'm just saying that the tassels, the really long tassels, because putting on a show, putting on the fancy robes, is something that Jesus spoke out against and to watch out for. And for you to say that this connection, when it's clear that it's political or it's religious pride that's trying to infiltrate the system that God had set up.
So in that case,
the tassels went decorative.
It's not complete.
The tassels went decorative. If you look at the clothing from that time period, Semitic peoples in general would always have like the way that they made their garments and stuff. They didn't make a fancy hem to their clothing. They would just tie up the ends in many tassels. And so this commandment is like, make on the corners more significant ones, and they're supposed to be remind you of the commandments and not
correct.
Isn't it like the Jewish version of the rosary?
But that's not what they were doing during Jesus' time, though.
What does it matter what they were doing during Jesus' time? We're talking about the Old Testament now.
No, I think I'm understanding his point.
Is there a story? I've never heard this one. Is there a Christian
well,
story?
I mean, Jesus' whole thing was like, you guys have like completely bastardized and like added so much stuff to Judaism. It's not what it should be anymore, right? So he was kind of going back. But either way, yeah, the tassels thing was that was like the preceding command in the previous chapter. So like they should be doing that, but in that case, it would make more sense if the story was that we got here was if it was somehow related to the preceding chapter. It would be about the religious aspect of it, but instead we're getting a political aspect too.
I got a couple more. Sorry, I thought you were done.
Political.
James Hogue says, in summary, people stink, and today they stink so bad God had to kill people. So an old man tells a young man to run through camp with innocent incense like a kid with sparklers, and 14,700 people die.
Spoilers.
Spoilers, I know. Although in fairness, from what I've read thus far of the Bible, killing people does seem to be one of God's favorite things. his version of the My Favorite Things song would go very differently.
Nice. And then the next comment is Eric Wanderer, who says that Midrash, the wife of On, son of Peleth, saved her husband from the rebellion of Korah. Contrarily, the wife of Korah was destroyed with her husband.
Is that like
Yeah,
is that like a real midrash? I'm not familiar with it.
I think I've heard a similar story, which is like the reason why On is mentioned at the beginning, but he doesn't die with the others, is that he was saved because his wife like spoke to him and like kept him at home,
Smacked
and
some
stopped
sense
him
into him.
something like that. I definitely know this story.
Citation needed. Eric, if
I
you
don't
want to
remember
cite
which
it,
midrash it is, but yeah, I would like to know which.
Yeah,
it's definitely a story that I heard, and I think there's more to the story. And I know that there is a Midrash Tanchuma, which is one of the major ones. I think.
Yes.
It has a really long, really long, like I don't know, 10 pages or something like that. Exposition, or whatever the word is, on this story. And I was going through it, and I was trying to get out all the little tidbits. There's a lot of like boring stuff as well, so that might be in there. I just didn't get to that bit yet.
Then Trevorn Wright says, what is your reasoning as to why certain war started in history in relation to Abrahamic religions? Why didn't the author try to resolve this problem when conflict is inevitable? Well, because conflict is the goal, isn't it?
In-group, out-group mentalities are very powerful. You can control a lot of people with them, and war is a good way to cement it via the sunk cost fallacy. After all, if I murdered your kid over something, I better not be wrong.
Well, I mean, every war has a different, reason it started. But also on top of the stuff that I was saying before, I just looked at something here and at a commentary, and one of the points brought up was that only Dathan and Abiram were actually noted in Deuteronomy 11:6 when like basically restating this account. There's no mention of Korah. There's just the mention of Dathan and Abiram. So that
is it referencing in Deuteronomy? Is it referencing the descendants? Because I noticed that Korah's descendants aren't associated with this, which was surprising to me because it's contradictory in a way. Korah's descendants weren't destroyed. Yeah.
Are you asking about how some of the sons of Korah are considered to be like writers of the Psalms and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you can go into that. I didn't want to derail it too much, but I was just curious from Lawrence's perspective if his passage in Deuteronomy.
Do you guys hear me? Because my thing kind of. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, my thing kind of glitched out for a second.
I don't want to hear about your thing.
Yeah, so. Well, you know what? You're gonna. I'll message you later about it. Let's see. So let's see. This is about keeping the Lord and His commandments. Let's see. It was not your children who saw what He did for you in the wilderness until you arrived at this place, and what He did to Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab the Reubenite, when He opened its
You're
mouth
reading
right in the
Deuteronomy.
middle of all Israel. Sorry, what?
Yeah. So are you reading Deuteronomy there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so so it's referencing his children, so the children of those clans. So when it comes to what's his name though, his children weren't persecuted.
So
maybe that's why.
So Korah is okay. I see what you're trying to get at.
Right, which lends credence to the theory that that Korah was one of the people that was killed in the fire, and his family wasn't affected by the swallowing of the earth, and that was only Dathan of Abiram's family that was affected.
Apparently,
but it is conflicts.
Apparently, Korah's descendants were like really into their position that they already had, but they weren't seeking some higher levels of.
I think we'll get to it with Toma when he's.
It's an inconsistency since God swallowing their tents in the earth would kill all the kids too, but it's
Well,
the
it
Bible.
explicitly
We
says that
don't
it
have
did.
consistency.
It
It's not
explicitly
meant.
says that it did. And there's also a tradition of like, if you go to a certain place in the desert, you can put your ear to the ground and hear the sons of Korach singing or whatever praises.
So they're trying to
Yeah,
like
in Psalms, right?
They were on like a ledge or something. They didn't go all the way down to Sheol.
Oh, is
so
that
they're trying to what suck
That's
up to God
interesting.
so he lets them out, or
I don't think they were killed though, right? They weren't.
I think
So
that's the thing. They
what's
were
the
like
interpretation?
saved and live
Yeah,
on
they
this
weren't
shelf somewhere.
persecuted.
oh
Well,
good.
God
it's
But are
not
you
people
assuming they
here.
died though, or am I
He's
missing
talking
something?
about
else?
a myth.
I'm talking about there's a myth that
You think the whole
I
Bible's
think
a
there's
myth,
different.
Lilith?
Yeah, but you're
Okay,
not
okay. Well,
thinking
P-Town,
correct.
even if the Bible was not a myth, what year are we talking about?
It's been a while.
Yeah. So has it been like more than 1,000 years, 2,000 years?
Yes.
Okay, then they died.
Everybody is dead, Dave.
They're not just
1400
under the
BC.
ground. They're not just under the ground
Lawrence will lose
singing
it. I
praises.
said 1400
till this
BC,
day.
but I said
No,
it.
it's okay. I've heard stupidity before.
All right, comment. Let's go.
I'm seeing one additional comment.
Okay. So Eric Wanders says, Tomer, I will put the link on Discord of where I found that.
Yeah, I found it independently. I think it's Numbers Rabbah 1820. I
Okay.
think that's where
Yeah, he did post it from the Jewish Women's Archive.org. Lovely.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start my commentary. On verse 1, On son of Peleth. His name is not mentioned elsewhere in the story or in texts that refer to it. Moreover, the names On and Peleth are not mentioned in Reuben's genealogy. But we do find Eliav, son of Palu, son of Reuben, in Numbers 26, verses 5 and 8. Therefore, some scholars propose that this is a scribal error, confusing between On and Eliav and between Peleth and Palu. Gershon Galil writes that one could justify the name On the son of Peleth here based on 1 Chronicles 2, verses 26 and 33, where their names appear in Judah's genealogy. He writes that there's evidence that the tribes of Reuben and Judah shared the same clans, like Chetzron and Carmi in Numbers 26, verses 5 to 6, and 1 Chronicles 2, verses 2 to 7. About the... yeah.
Are you still on verse 1?
Yes?
Yeah. Okay. Finish verse 1 on now.
Yeah. About the became insolent in the NIV. So Hebrew it's vaikach, which literally means and he took. And many commentators noted the difficulty regarding this word since it has no object. Milgrom gives 10 possible solutions. Quote, 1. No translation is required since the verb need not imply any specific action but only the preparation for it, as Nachmanides, citing 2 Samuel 18:18, proposed. 2. Took men, with men being understood, even as Halutzat and KJV. 3. Septuagint renders spoke, indicating the reading Vayomer. 4. Some versions render separate himself, started a faction, or made a division, like the Peshitta and Targum Onkelos. 5. Korach took, quote unquote, 250 men, rose up against Moses, and combined against Moses and Aaron, Nachmanides. The following emendations have also been proposed. 6. Vaikom arose by A. Kuenen. 7. Vaikhal, gathered by Banech. 8. Vaikaneu, envied by G. Richter. 9. Vaikach, was bold or insolent, from Arabic wakach, by G. R. Driver. 10. Connect took with 250 Israelites, Ibn Ezra, deleting to rise up against Moses together with as Erlich proposed. End quote. Targum Pseudo-Jonathan reads, he took his robe which was all of blue, reflecting a rabbinic interpretation, Numbers Rabbah 18:3, that Korach made a blue robe, talit, and asked Moses halachic questions regarding this robe.
Yeah, so the we just read the bit where it says, put the tassels on the corner of your garment and attach a blue thread. And so Korach went to Moses, and he was in this, according to this Talmud or Medrash, whatever it is, he takes a complete garment of the blue material, and he says, does it still need tassels on it? And Moses was like, yes. And he said, this doesn't make any sense, because if one thread on each corner makes the garment okay or fulfills the commandment, why wouldn't a full garment of blue thread fulfill it? And I think there's also a second one where he says, what was the other thing? Oh, whatever, don't worry about it. It's just like a similar sort of question, but for a different topic.
Yeah, I should also note that Ashley renders it became arrogant, and he writes, a more fruitful solution may be suggested by Origen's translation. I'm not going to say what it, hyperefaneuthe, I think. He became haughty or arrogant, which Nath and Snaith, among others, take as presupposing vayekach from Yud Kafchet, be bold or insolent, as in Arab, wakicha. Yeah, as I mentioned previously.
Hey, question, just what was the word? You said it was origin?
Hyperefaneuthe.
Wait, sorry, did you say that was a translation of something, or that was the...
Origin's translation. That's what it says.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. Verse 3, you have gone too far. Hebrew is rav lachem, literally, you have too much, meaning you have taken much more distinction for yourselves, as Rashi, Bechosho, and Licht render. This phrase appears in Deuteronomy 1:6 and 2:3 in reference to enough time spent at Horeb and the wilderness. Peshitta renders, it is not enough for you, and Levine renders, you seek too much.
Oh yeah, so just for verse 1, right? So that's the only mention of this guy on Son of Peleth. Yes. And what was it? Not him. It was who was it? Who mentioned it? Who just made a comment? Eric. Yeah, Eric Wonder said he brought up this midrash, so I looked it up. The link that he sent. Yeah, the story. I do remember the story. So the story is that his wife realized that this was like going to be a rebellion. It wouldn't be safe, whatever. And so she gave him wine to drink and made him drunk so that he would be late. And to stop anyone coming from waking him up and bringing him, like being called by messenger, she exposed herself at the doorway to her tent so that people wouldn't come in. Well,
so he was saved by his wife's titties.
Something like that. I mean, maybe she was just showing an ankle. Who knows?
An ankle.
Yeah.
Okay. Or a lock of hair or whatever.
Yeah. Verse 4. According to Ibn Ezra, Levine, and Ashley, this was done to appeal to God for assistance. Licht writes that Moses accepted the rebuke with humility. Bechor Shor and Chizkuni wrote that he fell out of shame. Aaron is not mentioned here. Nachmanides writes that Aaron, in his modesty and holiness, did not utter a word throughout this controversy, and admitted that Korach's status was greater than his own. Verse 6, Korach and all your followers. Hebrew Bible reads Korach and all his followers, compared to KJV, for example. The NIV follows the Peshitta and Vulgate. Levine and Ashley propose that this is a gloss, intended to make sure that the reader understands who the participants of this test were. Milgrom proposed a scribal error since the letters Vav and final Chaf appears the same in Old Script. And so Adato, his followers, originally read Adatecha, your followers. Verse 7, you Levites have gone too far. Moses uses the same term that Korach used against him, Rav Lachem. And Ashley comments, the last phrase is strange since the group Moses is addressing is not made up wholly of Levites. Some scholars conclude that these words are out of place here and should be moved to the end of the clause, you have gone too far, in verse 3. This is a rather extensive displacement, although it is conceivable. Literally, these words of address identify the whole of Korach's congregation with him and also provide a transition to Moses' address to the Levites in the next verses.
I just love how the commentary includes how modest and humble and totally without any arrogance the leaders took this criticism that just so happened to end in the horrific death of everyone who opposed them and all of their families. But they were very humble during, and that's very believable and noble.
Verse 8, Targums Pseudo-Jonathan adds Korach and his kindred. because it's the plural. And verse 11, Levine comments, the syntax of this verse is ambiguous. One could translate, therefore you and your entire faction are the ones who are rallying against Jehovah. But in context, the point is that the actions of Korach's faction constituted rebellion against Jehovah, and not just against Aaron. Idiomatic hanoadim al means to assemble against, hence to conspire. Conceivably, there is a play on sound and meaning between adatecha, your faction, and hanoadim, that are conspiring, even though etymologically the two words derive from different verbal roots. Verse 13, a land flowing with milk and honey. While this term is used to describe Canaan, it is now used to describe Egypt. Ashley writes that this shows the seriousness of the rebellion, and Licht writes that they use this term to mock Moses. Verse 14, do you want to treat these men like slaves in the NIV? Oh, okay. Hebrew Bible reads, should you gouge out those men's eyes, like the JPS renders. Milgrom, Ashley, and Licht read it, to mislead or hoodwink. Levine notes that gouging out the eyes was a known punishment imposed on runaway slaves, prisoners, and rebellious vassals, as seen in Judges 16:21, 2 Kings 25 verses 47, and Jeremiah 39 verses 47. These men could refer to the elders who accompanied Moses, as Ibn Ezra suggested, to themselves, as Rashi, Sfon, and Licht, or the people who rose against him, Rashbam and Ashley. About the donkey in verse 15, Septuagint reads, I have not taken what was desired from any one of them. The Samaritan text read, I have not taken a single luxury from them. Both read donkey, chamor, as chamud, desire or luxury. While it could be a scribal error because Dalet and Resh look similar, Chazal in the Talmud Megillah 9b wrote that this change is deliberate, probably to prevent the impression that Moses took other items, as Rashi notes. Milgrom, however, writes that the Masoretic text rendition is supported by Samuel's defense of his administration in 1 Samuel 12:3 and by a similar formula in the El Amaner letters.
I just got to ask something, Tomer. So,
yes.
In Kings, they talk about runaway slaves, and one of the punishments is cutting out their eyes. How is that?
Yes.
Is this real? Because that's clearly not what you're supposed to do according to Scripture. So I'm confused.
Well, if it says so, then
isn't King Scripture?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but it's not what the Torah says, right? So what's the deal? I mean, I don't know why that just resonated with me. Like,
oh, you said in Kings?
Why are we bringing?
That's what Tomer just said, right?
Yes, 2 Kings 25 versus 47.
Okay, gotcha.
That his
well, that might
commentary
just
do
be
say-
indicative of Torah stuff being written later.
Oh my gosh, Lawrence.
It is what it is.
Everything hints to that in your mind.
I think that might have
God
something to
forbid
do with
the
When
Bible.
Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomistic history form the basis for the Torah. Yes.
Well,
It's
It's just your presumption.
No, it's
Always.
not a presumption.
No,
It
it
is.
makes a
It's
lot
always
of
I
sense.
will-
If you come to a conclusion after reasoning it, after evaluating the evidence for and against and everything, and then you come to this conclusion, that's not a presumption. Your belief,
I'm accusing him of
that's a
something else.
presumption.
Sure.
Your belief is a presumption.
So is
Our
his.
position is
So
not.
is Aaron.
No, his is
No.
not.
No, when you
can-
reason, when you
Motive.
follow the reason out of the belief that you grew up in,
You have a motive.
and you now
too, Aaron.
and now you've had evidence to change your mind and go to a different direction, that's not a presumption. When you continue to believe whatever lies you were told as a child, that's a presumption.
I would
You
like
have
to.
presumptions too, Aaron. You presume the Bible's not true as well when you study.
No,
it.
I don't
a conclusion.
presume.
Of course you do.
I
really.
thought the Bible was true because that's what everybody told me. And then instead of a presumption, I read through it and reasoned through it and realized, no, there's no way this piece of trash could possibly be right about fuck all.
And now you presume that it's not true.
Again,
what?
you're not using the word presume correctly. You're using it dishonestly.
Yes, P-Town, correct your many errors.
I will just
And by
mention
the way,
that
That
Sorry.
reminds me.
Is
P-Town
P-Town
and I
short
were
for-
supposed to have a half a dozen different conversations already, wherein he would bring up a topic that he's absolutely wrong about, and we were supposed to have a video to discuss that, he and I. For whatever reason, we've never gotten to any of those discussions.
Which one are we going to do
Well, no,
first? Which one do you want to
we,
do
we
first?
had
Lauren?
one. We had
conclusion?
one where you ducked and dodged and evaded every possible point when we were
I could
talking
say the
live
same.
in Washington State. There was that one.
Which was impromptu, by the way. I didn't know we were doing it then. But
Well, do you have to have rehearsal to tell bullshit
I
stories?
will put you as a priority in my life, Aaron. I will put you before my job, my kid on the way, my house remodel, everything.
Well, is that what I asked for? I
Just
didn't
tell me
realize
what would you
hyperbole.
like?
I didn't
What would
realize
you-
I
which
asked for
one-
hyperbole.
You and
This-
no, you. I'm telling you the truth. You and I. When would you like to dish it out, and what topic? All I need to know is the topic.
Let's
That's
go
all
back
I
over
need.
the
Doesn't
list.
matter who I'm debating. Just give me the topic.
Peter, do you
But
have the
it's
list
not a
to
debate.
hand?
It's an education.
Okay, let's have a discussion on which one you don't have to answer now. Just we'll do it.
Okay.
I'll make sure because I genuinely
'Cause
do.
I
wanna
think
do
I
that with
started.
you.
I started an email chain
Yeah.
to talk about the different topics that we were supposed to discuss that you never made time for.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I've been waiting for you too, so you can pick the first topic. How about that?
Yeah, okay, we get it. Both of you
We'll
should
go.
show more initiative. All right, I get it. So while you guys figure
It'll
that
be
out
fun,
by
Aaron.
yourselves, I do need or I would like to take a moment here. So I know that P-Town's a Poe. All right, I know that that's what that's short for, Poe-Town. But in the case that there are still people who believe that P-Town is actually a Christian, I would very much like to defend myself here. The conclusions that I come to are not the presumptions, they are the conclusions. When I first read about the documentary hypothesis, for example, there were a lot of good arguments that led in that direction. But as I read more about it and arguments in favor of other positions, I eventually came to a more supplementary hypothesis position. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, and Tomer's already he's already making fun of me for this. I can hear it. Should read something from John Van Setter's. These are not presumptions; they are very detailed arguments, and
They're
they help us
conclusions based
construct
on
a
evidence.
model.
And I
Did you just say that I'm not a Christian? Is that
I
what
think
you
He
you
just
says
definitely
you're
are
a
a Poe.
Poe. He says you're
I think
faking.
you're a Poe.
He's
yes.
he does the same thing that I do,
He
where
said
you
that I'm
think
not a
where you think,
Christian.
is
Is that what he
it
means?
possible for somebody to
Right,
hold
yeah.
this position honestly? Are they stupid? Are they dishonest? Are they both? So he comes to the conclusion that it's not possible for you to be both that stupid and that dishonest, that you must be pretending just for the lulls.
Right, yeah.
It's the
And he doesn't
internet. There
presuppose
are
that.
always Poes.
Aaron.
No, he concludes that there are always trolls.
I
on
could
the
be
internet.
wrong. I could be wrong.
Aaron,
But
I
that-
just-
that
I
is
just-
my-
Is that
my
a good
belief.
definition that I'm just here for
I-
the lulls?
I'd
No,
like
that-
to
that-
address the
Lawrence.
issue of presumption because I was a devout Christian for decades, and I presumed many of the things that P-Town now presumes or claims to presume, whichever way the truth may be. And so my conclusions are the opposite of a presumption, because there was many, 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 many years where my mind had been so trained in certain habits of thought that it was not physically possible for me to imagine God not existing. Not possible at all. I couldn't do it if I tried. And I did try, just hypothetically, to try and understand. And I couldn't. So it's not stupidity. And if it is dishonesty, it's not necessarily originating in the person. But I can definitely say that all of my positions now, which you find so repellent, P-Town, and I don't say that as a criticism, I'm not shocked by that position at all. None of them were ever presumptions. They were always the last thing I ever thought I would conclude. I would have wagered my life, and did, that I would never think such a thing to be true. That is how strong the evidence had to be, and how nuanced and how multivariate, and I could, if my life ever calms down, I'm going to have to make an entire series of videos about the many things, both morally and intellectually, that led to my deconversion.
Yeah, on a similar vein, I want to chime into what Lilith just said to see the advantage that Lilith and I both have over Lorence in this case is that Lorence was never a believer, but Lilith believed crazy things. I believed a completely different set of crazy things, and we both earnestly believed them. So while Lorence thinks that there's not possible for you to be that dumb and that dishonest at the same time, Lilith and I both know that it's possible to really be that stupid, because we were. Both of us.
And I'm coming from the other side. I was an atheist, didn't grow up in a religious family.
Oh yeah, you were an atheist. You knew so much about evolution and everything.
I
yeah,
didn't know
I'm sure
everything
you
about
did.
evolution, but I believed it.
He was secular, all right. He wasn't
Okay.
religious. Is that
Vaguely
My point
secular.
is,
Arn, just for the
sorry, I'm
record,
just
I
doing the note thing.
found the list. So it was biblical cosmology. Does the Bible support abortion? Evidence of evolution versus creationism. Simply explaining evolution. And what is truth? Those were the topics you agreed on.
Yep.
well,
So
what
those
is
are the
truth
first
we
ones.
started with. We didn't agree on that. We didn't agree on how you.
May I suggest truth?
Yes. Because Arn sent this in an
Well, it was
email.
like a 4-hour long.
If you hadn't agreed on it, there would have been a reply that you didn't agree on any of those topics, and that email isn't there.
Yep. So I'm welcome. I will welcome any of those, any that you like. But the thing is that you have a belief system that you have to defend, and it is all indefensible. All of it.
I'm going to.
You are holding to. You are
in our little
embracing
discussion.
a lie. I'm going to be talking to somebody in I estimate somewhere in your 30s. I'm going to have to explain to you why Santa Claus doesn't exist.
You're going to let me pick it.
You
offering it
pick
to
the
you.
topic.
Do you have a
It
preference?
doesn't.
Like it's going to be a mutual thing. If you want, we can work together. Or if you want me
You
to pick
you
it, I'll
pick the
probably
topic.
have
It
my
doesn't
wife
matter.
pick it.
I agree with
Whichever
Thomas.
one, whichever one you feel most comfortable losing.
Oh my gosh, I love you, Arn, but I am going to crush you
Okay.
in our little discussion.
This
Okay,
is-
I
this
think
is gonna-
with
Yeah, like you did last time, where you dodged
Deal with
every
your own
question.
shit on your own time.
Yeah, that's
Deal
a
with your own shit later.
presupposition.
I-
One more comment, and then we need to get back to Tomo's
Yes.
comment.
All right,
Yeah.
so
We've
the
finished
unlucky
the chapter.
legume, the unlucky legume offers $50 and says it's very early to ask, but when you get to the New Testament, if we live that long, will Tomer be staying on the panel? There are a lot of passages presented as messianic prophecy, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his thoughts on them. That's a valid point. I mean, Tomer will have a different set of value to this panel when we get into the New Testament, where it's no longer where the Hebrew Bible suddenly becomes irrelevant because now we're reading from the Greek. But whenever the Gospels make reference to Isaiah 7 or anything like that, then Tomer's input is going to be valuable in a different sense, because I want to hear the traditional Jewish interpretation when we get into these, this messianic bullshit that we get in the New Testament. That's going to be amusing to me.
I mean, we will be going for Isaiah before that, so
That's
Yeah.
true. But
Right,
there
yeah.
are also some prophecies that I don't know the source of.
But we get to Matthew, and then Matthew points back to Isaiah, and there's a number of other things, where the New Testament is going to be making comments about how the Jews are, the contrast between the Christian and the Jewish belief, which is not necessarily separate in the New Testament, because Jesus himself considered himself Jewish, right? According to the Gospels, Jesus thinks he's Jewish. Jesus thinks he's fulfilling Jewish prophecy.
Oh,
Will
I can't
Tomer agree with
wait.
that?
I can't wait for the argument about Alma.
I want to talk about this for a second. Lawrence, you said I'm a Poe.
Lilith, please.
Yes.
I'm
That
a
means-
Poe because Your primary reason was because I said that Jesus was the most anti-Semitic person. That's I can't imagine myself saying this. I typically say that Jesus is the most anti-religious. You said anti-Semitic.
Misquote.
You said that's what I said.
I did not say most. I did not say most anti-Semitic. I said that you said that Jesus was anti-Semitic, just in general. Not
I
the
said
most
that he.
anti-Semitic.
I know, but the way that you described what I said using a different word made me look bad when I wasn't on the stream last time. When I typically say is Jesus is the most anti-religious person of all time, possibly.
But you
the most religious person is the most anti-religious person.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of confusing, Arn, but we'll cover it soon.
At the time that I remember, you said he was anti-Semitic, so I specifically used that word.
Yes,
Okay.
I remember that.
I don't remember that, but
you might have
in fact
misspoke.
Yeah, like I didn't want to misquote you, so I actually went back and checked.
Oh, you did? Okay. I would like to know. I would like to know if I said. But anyway, typically what I said
that was one of the
most anti-religious.
I think you were trying to be hyperbolic, but whatever.
Yeah.
Who could believe that P-Town would be hyperbolic?
Right. Yeah. So like when I say I think you're a pope, I don't know if like you are like actually a Christian or not, but I think that if you are a Christian, then you are playing it up to an extreme degree, where you are taking positions that you don't actually believe. You just want to like ruffle some feathers, kind of thing. So you have like said some other ridiculous things that I've never even heard. I've never heard any like theologian even say these things.
You're so lucky you don't live in the South, Lawrence.
Like the thing is, these things are so outside.
Like what though? Because you already like you said that
the cross in Exodus.
It wasn't that Numbers?
You mean Numbers?
Oh, sorry, Numbers. My bad.
That's not that outlandish. It's math, Lawrence.
No, it is outlandish.
Draw it out.
Which I actually proved is an inverted cross, which actually proves that
Homer
Satan
actually
wrote the Bible.
backed me up on it.
I show that it actually shows an inverted cross, but that is irrelevant.
He backed up on you and went over all four wheels.
I don't see. This is the thing where I'm not sure.
Lawrence.
Here's the thing where I'm not sure if P-Town is fully aware of what he's doing or not, because he might be totally aware.
Of course, he's not fully aware. That's why he's a legitimate Christian.
If you actually followed me though when I talked to atheists offside the stream, like I brought on Arn, you talked to Jackson Rowe. I brought Jackson Rowe onto my channel. We talked for a little while. I'm open to people convincing me otherwise, and I understand how outlandish some of the stuff that I believe, and I do second guess it. Trust me, it's not easy, but I have other reasons to believe what I believe, and it is this yin and yang effect that is probably what you're sensing. To be honest with you, there is that contention there. So if you're sensing that,
when you say you have reasons to believe,
not now.
Emotional attachments don't really count in this context. We're talking about evidence.
Not now.
I'm not emotional in that sense.
I have to
not
interject.
Even spiritual. I'm about as spiritual
Guys,
as a rock.
Yeah.
Have we finished number 16?
No, we haven't.
No.
That's the point. You've all been arguing with each other about this one instance for 15 minutes.
That's what P-Town's job
I
is.
don't
That's
care.
why Lawrence thinks he's a Poe.
About this point, I did look up the text that referred to gouging one's eyes, and they do not refer to Jews doing it. It refers to Gentiles doing it. But the point is that, as Levine notes, this was a known punishment imposed on runaway slaves, prisoners, and rebellious vassals. It was a common punishment. That doesn't refer to like the Torah, like something contradicts it. No, it's just like a general like method of punishment. So now can I please continue? Okay. Verse 16, you and all. The Septuagint reads, sanctify. Milgrom writes that this may be an interpretation, since a theophany requires ritual sanctification on the day before. Compare verse 5 and 11:18. And on verse 22, O God, the God who gives breath to all living things. Ashley notes that this title for God is found only here and in Numbers 27:16, but is common in apocryphal texts. For example, Jubilees 10:3, 2 Maccabees 3:24, 14:46, and over 100 times in Enoch. He and Levine render, Lord the God of the spirits of all flesh. Milgrom reads the second God, Elohei, as source of, and thus, O God, source of the breath of all flesh. The Vulgate avoids the doubling by writing, O most mighty the God, etc. Rashi, Rashbam, and Licht render, knower of thoughts. Targum Suda Jonathan adds, who has put the spirit of life in the bodies of the children of men. And that's it for the commentary on this part.
Is it where did you say where else it's used?
Where? Oh,
This exact expression, is it used anywhere else?
oh, apocryphal texts.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Jubilees, Maccabees, Enoch.
Does
Yeah.
anyone remember where we read to?
22.
Inclusive or exclusive?
20 exclusive, I think.
Exclusive,
From
okay.
23 to yeah.
So
We need to
inclusive
start from
22.
23.
Yeah.
Start at 23.
Who's reading?
I think I'm supposed to. Is it
Yep.
too
Okay.
loud?
Pete
though?
Town's going to be reading, and we've only got, 12 or 13 verses.
Yeah.
So, Pete Town, put on
Hmm.
your priestly magistry and show it's the
So
reverence.
God
that
spoke
this-
to Moses.
That was
So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the congregation, saying, Get away from the tents, Korah, Dathan, and Abraham." Then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, "Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins." So they got away from around the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the doors of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little children. And then Moses said, "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them by my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord." Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them. They perished from among the assembly. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up." And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy and scattered."
I know why Isaac is confused. The reason is that verses 35 to 50 in the Old Testament is chapter 17 in the Hebrew Bible. Verses 1 to 17 at least.
Yeah, the numbering is different. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just continue then.
"Tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, and scatter the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented themselves before the Lord. Therefore they are holy, and they shall be assigned to the children of Israel." So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers with those who were burnt up had presented, and they were hammered out as a covering on the altar, to be a memorial to the children of Israel, that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron or Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he might not become like Korah and his companions, just as the Lord has said to him through Moses. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." Now it happened, when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron, that they turned toward the tabernacle of meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it. The Lord and the glory of the Lord appeared. Then Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." And they fell on their faces. So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer and put fire in it from the altar, put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun." Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded and ran into the midst of the assembly. And already the plague had begun among the people. So he put in the incense and made atonement for the people, and he stood between the dead and the living, so the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incident. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped.
Okay. Now my commentary, or
No, please go ahead.
yeah, sure thing. Verse 24, the tents. The Hebrew is mishkan, which is in a singular. They couldn't have lived in one tent, according to verse 26, and this word is never used to describe human inhabitation. Only the plural, mishkanot, does, as in 24:5 and Isaiah 54:2. The mishkan usually describes the tabernacle or the temple. Furthermore, as Ashley notes, in verse 19, Korach assembled the congregation around the door of the tent of meeting. If now they are told to get away from the tent of Korach, Dathan and Abiram, they are told, in G.B. Gray's words, to depart from a place in which they are not. Septuagint tries to solve these problems by omitting the names of Dathan and Abiram here and in the first part of verse 27, and renders Mishkan as congregation. Ashley further writes, scholars have offered several solutions to these difficulties. One, some take the word Mishkan to mean tabernacle and posit that Korach, Dathan, and Abiram had set up their own rival shrine. Two, others go a step further than the Septuagint and eliminate all three names from the text as a later addition. The reason for such an addition would be the editorial wish to make the two rebellions appear together as one. The reading of the text is then, tell the congregation to move away from around the tabernacle. 3, still others posit that Mishkan here simply means dwelling, and assumes that Korach, after he had summoned the congregation of Israel to the tent of meeting, withdrew to the tent of Dathan and Abiram. This option proposes a unique meaning for the singular Mishkan, and also hypothesizes what Korach must have or might have done. The text is silent on the matter. The third option, although it has considerable problems, not the least of which is living with a certain ambiguity in the text, may be the best of this list. By identifying Korach with Dathan and Abiram, the text unifies the two rebellions into one, and also makes a transition back to the story of Dathan and Abiram in verse 25 to 34. Verse 26, do not touch anything. Milgrom comments, touch nothing, since they will be subject to the ban, cherem, and will be destroyed, according to Abba Vanel. The same prohibition occurs at the convocation at Sinai in Exodus 19, verses 12 to 13. The implication is that contact with Sancta can be fatal. Even more relevant is the banned spoil of Jericho, which is fatally contagious to Achan, I believe, and his entire household, including his families, Joshua 7:24. A contagion that can be imparted by touch, Numbers 4:15, and even by sight, Numbers 4:20, comparing Genesis 19:17.
Numbers 420, very nice. Let's go. 420, blaze it for Jesus.
Yeah.
Blaze it for Jesus and puff, puff, pass with a touch.
Verse 27 had come out. Milgrom comments, this detail is crucial to the narrative. It presumes that for a curse to be effective, the object of the curse must be in view. Dathan, Abiram, and their families had to be seen by Moses. So too, Balaam must see Israel, the object of his intended curse, 22:41 and 23:13. There is also an ironic literary touch here. Dathan and Abiram have accused Moses of blinding the people's eyes in verse 40. Now with Dathan, Abiram, and their families in full view, all of Israel will behold their punishment. The Midrash, Tanchuma Korach 22, finds yet another motive for their standing in front of their tents, a sign of their open defiance of Moses. Verse 30 brings about something totally new. The Hebrew is Beri'ah Yivra, literally will create a creation, and is unique here. KJV and NIV followed the Vulgate. The Septuagint reads, will show forth by an omen. The Samaritan text, will create a creature. And Targums Pseudo Jonathan, if a death which had not been created since the days of the world be now created for them. Ibn Ezra renders, makes a great chasm. Verse 32, all those associated with Korach. Milgrom comments, the fate of Korach himself is not mentioned here, although 26:10 relates that he too was swallowed by the earth. The implication here is that Korach met his fate elsewhere, that is, at the entrance of the tent of meeting together with the 250 chieftains, verses 17:35 and 17:5. On the other hand, the version of this story in Deuteronomy 11:6, which ascribes only the death of Dathan and Abiram to the earthquake, reads as follows, quote, when the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them, along with their household, their tents, and every living thing, yakum, in their train, end quote. Thus, the possibility should be entertained that originally the Numbers text read V'kol ha'adam, and all the people, and that Asher leKorach, belonging to Korach, was interpolated in order to include Korach in the fate of Dathan and Abiram. Whether Korach was swallowed by the earth or burned by fire, or both or neither, is discussed in detail by the rabbis in Talmud Sanhedrin 110a. Sorry, Talmud Sanhedrin 110a.
So just for clarification, Korah is like the sheep and goats and cows of Egypt who died like 17 times different ways. There was a plague, there was the hail, there was the killing of the firstborn. By that point, I don't know what firstborn were left, but things and stuff. Lots and lots of different ways to die. Oh, it's like that song.
Who's counting?
Yeah, that song popped into my head too.
Dumb
Dumb ways to die. Yeah.
I have two more comments about up to 35, and after that I have like 3 other pages of commentary. Do you want to extend it, or do you want me to we'll continue this?
Spit it out, boy.
Okay, sure thing. Verse 33, Ashley comments, the text makes clear that what happened wasn't something new, i.e. unique, a direct intervention of Yahweh in contrast with the normal workings of the world, verses 28 to 30. It is natural to speculate on the exact nature of this event. Of course, God is capable of using natural phenomena for divine purposes, for example, the quails in chapter 11. Greta Holt has posited that the most likely natural phenomenon that would answer to the need of the text is the kewil, a muddy bog that, due to climatic conditions, can develop a crust over it, which makes it look dry and solid, but may split open if it rains and becomes hazardous. Again, however, the text stresses not so much the natural event as its causation as an act of judgment by Yahweh. Verse 35, Levine writes that P's version resumes here. He writes that what P states contradicts the account in Numbers 16, verses 25 to 34, written by J.E. Here, the people are burned by fire instead of being swallowed up by the earth. Milgrom, however, writes that the principals were swallowed by the earth, and the 250 chieftains died by fire at the tabernacle. Verses 36 to 50, as I mentioned previous to Isaac, these verses are chapter 17, verses 1 to 15 in the Hebrew Bible. So the confusion, I don't know why they decided, this is a different chapter.
Yeah, they split them up differently occasionally. It's really annoying.
Yes, it is. It really is. So I'll follow with the Old Testament numberings. So 37, coals. The Hebrew is ish. As noted in Leviticus 10:1, some, like Levine, render it incense. Most commentators, however, interpret it to mean coals. And 38, overlay the altar. Milgrom comments, but according to Exodus 27:2 and 38:2, the altar was already plated with bronze. This ostensible contradiction is eliminated by the Greek, which adds the following to Exodus 38:2, which is 38:22 in the Septuagint. He made the bronze altar out of the bronze censers that belonged to the men who had revolted with the company of Korach. Okay. Consequently, some moderns regard the present passage as the story accounting for the installation of the bronze plating of the altar. However, the text can be accepted at face value. It merely indicates that the altar was bronze plated a second time in order to serve as a warning sign to unauthorized encroachers.
A second time? So we already had the God said, put bronze on my altar, and now somebody did a thing, but it's sacred because they offered it to God, but also God killed them. So now we have double.
I'm sorry that
sorry.
I'm
So you're right.
I'm hearing. I think it's Peter like making sounds.
I thought that was Ember making sounds.
No, I've been muted.
I think that's Peter.
I mean, I do make malevolent sounds from time to time.
It might have been me because my dog's wanting to play, and I saw my mic was still open. My bad.
Okay.
Don't you hate when people do that? I mean, when people of that age let their dogs make a bunch of noise.
It's not professional. It's not professional, Arn. It's not professional if you have your dogs interfere with a show.
I just want to hear Lilith say sorry again. Sorry.
She is not amused.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll continue.
Well, if you enjoy that sort of thing, go to Canada.
I'll continue. Verse 46, Ashley comments, this verse is both the center and the turning point of the passage. Aaron is told to take the, i.e. a particular designated censer, and to make atonement on behalf of the Israelites. The censer that Aaron took may have been the one mentioned in Leviticus 16:12 in the ritual of Yom Kippur. Aaron was to prepare this censer in the normal way with coals from the altar. They would be holy, and incense, compare 16 verses 6 to 7 and 17, and to avert the disaster by this means. It is unclear why this means was chosen, since it is unusual to make atonement without a blood sacrifice, but compare Exodus 30:15. One explanation is that Yahweh gave these instructions to Moses and Aaron during prayer. Since the original offense had been given by an illegitimate incense offering, 16:17, the remedy would be a legitimate offering of the same kind. Since no rationale is mentioned in the text itself, this remains conjecture.
Wouldn't all the people God burned to death in a big pile count as an offering? Or does that not count if he does the burning?
Well, that would create problems later, because the whole point of the New Testament is God offering a sacrifice to himself. If him doing it doesn't count, there's an issue, you know?
He never did burn Jesus, though, to be fair. May have been a human sacrifice, but it was not a burnt offering, so you know.
No, it's the same verse. Wrath has come out from the Lord. Milgrom comments, wrath is conceived as an independent entity, see 153 and 18:5, equivalent to the destroyer, Hebrew HaMashchit in Exodus 12:23, who acts as God's agent of destruction, 2 Chronicles 19:2. According to Rashi, the rabbis in Talmud Shabbat 89a, believe that this function was assumed by the angel of death, who is also called the anger before the Lord, who with the authority to kill. God's destroyer, according to the rabbis, did not distinguish between the innocent and the wicked. Thus, the divine wrath or plague or destroyer is regarded as an amoral force, which can be overcome only by blood, incense, or some other ritual.
Oh my God, he's licensed to kill. It's 007, the angel.
Yeah. And the plague, Hebrew it's Hanagef. And Levine comments, Hebrew Nagef occurs in Exodus 12:13 with reference to the smiting of the firstborn in Egypt. Ironically, the Levites were supposed to protect the Israelite community against Negef by attending properly to the tasks of the tabernacle. The proper maintenance of the tabernacle was requisite to averting God's wrath, Numbers 8:19. When, however, a group of Levites rebelled against the leadership of Moses and Aaron and thereby aroused God's wrath, the result was Negef. Verse 48, Rashbam explains that the destroyer couldn't cross beyond where the incense was held. Ashley notes that Aaron had to violate the statute concerning the high priest's contact with the dead, as in Leviticus 21:11, to save their lives. Rashi, based on Tanchuma Tetzaveh 15, writes, Aaron grasped the angel and held him against his will. The angel said to him, permit me to perform my duty. He said to him, Moses ordered me to stop you. He said to him, I represent God while you represent Moses. He said to him, Moses says nothing of his own violation, only from the mouth of the Almighty. If you don't believe me, why the Holy One, blessed is he, and Moses are at the entrance of the tent of meeting? Come with me and ask.
So
Yeah,
they
we got him
interpret this
there.
the same way as Genesis 30. Jacob asked or wrestling God, where God says, "Well, you need to let me up so that I can get the sun up in the air."
Yes, exactly.
Is anyone else getting hints of Calvin ball? Does nobody else read Calvin and Hobbes?
I do, but I'm not getting. Yeah, that Calvin and Hobbes is not the thing I thought of. No.
Yeah, Calvin ball. Where you make up the rules as long as you can make a justification for how it works with the last rule, you're good.
Okay.
And my final comment on verse 49 about the 14,700. Licht comments that this number is meant to show that the chain of rebellions and plagues that began on Korah's initiative has reached its severity peak. Ashley notes that this number is just under 2.5% of the totals listed in 146 and 339. And that's it for my commentary on this chapter.
Okay. So have we covered both?
Well, it was really just the one. Do you mean both chapters?
Yeah.
The political and the religious.
Oh. So the thing is, there's still, depending on how you want to split it up, right? Because part of chapter 17 is part of 16, which we mentioned before.
Let's go with the Old Testament. I'm not gonna confuse you.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. I will be. I'm in town again, and we'll be able to do the normal Saturday morning arrangement that we've been doing. All right. So everybody's up for that.
Yeah, I think I can.
Yes. So I do.
Yep.
I guess no. We can talk about parsing it after the stream.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and see you this weekend.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye. Come join the Discord.
Yeah.